Welcome. This is Nina Karavasilis, and this is our last in-person class in Warner Springs, at least for the time being. I have compiled all of our classes to a YouTube site seeming from my website, so watch them all. And you might be now, as you're hearing this. We'll continue to have ad hoc field trips and a tea and book event where I have gathered donated books on gardening and cooking. We will drink special teas and purchase books for $2 each. All proceeds go to the Resource Center. This recap might even be an introduction to other classes, as this might be your first YouTube with us. So today I have a few things to talk about: how to propagate a loganberry, the recipe for bokashi grain, and we'll start with a recap of past classes. Consider staying today, which you're not going to be able to, for the kids class, as there will be art and food. We did a class on composting. In fact, developed a system that would include worms or vermiculture. And then I posed the question, why would someone introduce worms to compost? Well, they poop out wonderful nutrients, and that's the answer. So we have adults and kids involved in some way with our composting and vermiculture project. Bokashi is an anaerobic method for composting, and later we will talk about making the grain. Please name some things that bokashi can compost that regular hot anaerobic compost cannot. That would be bones, certain types of poo, meat, and dairy, like cheeses. We made a salsa garden, which came from the seed starts that Brittany did in her office. She used this system with lights and self-watering. And the answer to the question, what time of year is right to start peppers? I start mine in December and January. Of course, I start looking at the catalogs much earlier. This is one of Brittany's peppers and an outstanding made by the students from the school across the street. Please notice the irrigation. To make an outstanding, we thread large beads that I made out of that Crayola dough stuff, and we painted, and you put it onto wire, and the kids learn safe handling of sharp tools, which I think is a really great thing to tell kids about. These ornaments were made to keep the plants company, especially when they were young, so that the plants would grow up happy and inspired. So our plants had grown, and then we did some sample taste tests of different types of salsas that can go together, because it's really important to think about the tastes that you love and what you're going to grow next year. So we had standard tomatoes, cherry, peach, grapes, mint, za'atar, poblano, jalapeno, hatch peppers, cucumber, onion, and scallions. It was actually a lot of fun. These questions are to see what we learned in previous classes. So the answers are: directly roasting peppers on a gas range indoors. Yes, to other methods too, like baking, smoking, and on the grill. And capsaicin is good for pain relief. There are many different ways to sprout seeds, which gives a lot of nutrients to our bodies. Old standbys with cheesecloth covering a mason jar. Here is a pretty contraption that can sit on a countertop with pride. We also looked at microgreens. These were all great for folks living in tight quarters. And the answer is 3 times a day is good. We also talked about where to purchase seeds and what to look for. There are linked sheets to find more website info. I'm always trying to get a new word into my vocabulary. So this one is cotyledon. And, it's just kind of a tough one to say. So practice it a little bit before you use it in public. We had one class about sweets, how they affect one's body, how they are made, and what some alternatives are. We had stevia and carob plants to see, and lots of natural sugar alternatives to sample before buying. This is a photo of agave growing. Agave is a long-growing plant, but can handle our harsh climate in Warner Springs. Or you can buy it already made. We had classes on the correct timing to start seeds so that you can plant them during the best season they will grow in. San Diego Seed Company makes a calendar that is great for this timing and local to us here. I always had a copy nearby. Many students live with small spaced yards. Also, many have lots of undisturbed acreage, but maybe they just want a few fresh herbs close to the kitchen. This class talked about pot choices, design elements, and yes, some herbs too. We had a class about the beloved tepary bean, its history, its culture, and cultivation. Indeed, we tasted some too, and they tasted like a bean with a cultural significance. So, name a good thing about these beans. They are low in the glycemic index. Dorothy took some beans for the Los Coyotes Community Garden. Look at that. Jerusalem artichokes, sunchokes, and jaychokes. Call them what you will. They are roadside daisy-looking plants. Forageable, easy to grow, and harvest well in our area. They're now even available in some grocery stores. What does this above-ground plant part look like? Well, I just said daisy-like. Everybody loves a field trip, even the camels we visited. Catherine Fletcher is a local historian. Here we are in her home, taking in the history. We got to walk about her amazing garden and take in the views as she told us about planting ideas. Maya Streamer has made a lavender garden supreme. Beautiful, fragrant, and healing. She generously hosted us on her brand new deck. Here is yet another amazing view in Warner Springs. And there are many different varieties of lavender. Here is just a list of some very cool places to visit, some of my favorites. I love to break between topics with shocking facts. Things like this number, doesn't it cause you to pause and look at your own habits? I grow loganberries in my greenhouse, and I've also seen them outdoors. In this particular class time, I brought in bunches of clippings so we could learn how to make more out of one. A great way to share with friends. Berries are healthy, and this one has no thorns. So on this day, there was indeed a heap of greens. There were pots with core and perlite already mixed, and some clippers. Cocoa coir comes in a compressed brick-looking chunk that must be cleaved off and soaked before use. This is good for shipping. I got this on Amazon years ago before it was popular. perlite from the Home Depot or that type of store is loose and mixes by the handful into a bucket. Dampen again and then put into the pots about halfway full. Once the stick is in, fill the rest with the 50-50 combo to almost the top. Find a branch that is about pencil size in diameter. So we're looking for this year's growth, but not too flexible. Figure out where the direction the plant was growing from and make a diagonal cut just below one bump. This should be the bottom. You will count up 2 leaves and make a straight cut. This shows the up position. Remove the leaves, but leaving one on the top, perhaps a small one. So you've got your pencil thick piece of vine. Count out the 3 nodes. And those are those little bumps that have got kind of tails looking on them. Cut below the first one at an angle to the right, so that says where the bottom is. And this is where the roots will grow. I usually dip it in to something to help the roots grow, and sometimes that's cinnamon, if you have that, or growth hormone, if you prefer that. Cutting off the leaves makes it so that the plant is not trying to sustain them and puts their energy into the roots. But I like to leave one. I don't know, it's just personal. So you have your small pot with 50-50 coco coir and perlite, and it is nicely damp. You're going to dip the tip into cinnamon or growth hormone and resist using peat moss. We have kind of like overloved peat moss bogs, and they are dwindling. So coco coir is a nice substitute for peat moss. Now to tend. Dark area, perhaps a loose baggie on top to keep in some humidity. Check on them once a week and ditch the ones that are clearly dead. Sad but true, many will not make it. Dorothy had done a demonstration for us using the bokashi method. And it was done in a Homer bucket, and that can break down, this process can break down meat, bones, animal poop, and dairy. So if you have a bunch of dogs and cats, this is a process for you. We also talked about a starter, and I didn't think about it at the time, but weeks later I thought, what is this starter? Sometimes they're calling it rice, sometimes bran. So it's called EM, which stands for Effective Microorganisms. And you can buy it either liquid or powder, or you can make your own. Making the EM starter takes time, but not much effort. But it will take a few weeks. I had gone to a brewing store just because I happened to walk by, and this is what I found and used for my first bag. I then went to Sprouts or any health food store, and I purchased some bran from the bins. EM will bind to a number of things: wheat, malt, sawdust, old coffee grounds. And I have a nicely detailed recipe that I'll be happy to share. Start with a jar of water and half cup of rice. Swish it around, it gets cloudy. Let it sit near a window in order to gather the microbes through a cheesecloth lid. You add milk after a few days, throw out the curds after 5 days, then combine with the power stuff you have chosen. It sits for a few weeks and then dries. keeps in a bucket for a few months, and then that is what you add in layers to get your bokashi started. Go to my website, ninak.info. Yes, info, not com. In the More category, you will find Warner Springs Garden, and then find everything there, videos, handouts, etc. Do you have ideas for the garden? Please, let's brainstorm together. Also, contact with any questions I can help work through to find answers.